It might seem really bizarre, but until 2019 there were more men, 12, who had visited the lunar surface than those who had explored the deepest point of the ocean, the famous Mariana Trench. Only 3. Judging by this fact, it would seem that reaching that abyss, nearly 11,000 meters deep, must somehow be considered much more difficult than traveling 400,000 kilometers into space. But of course, we're talking about feats on very different levels, both technologically and psychologically. It almost seems like humans are much more afraid of being confined in a bathyscaphe than on a spacecraft. What do you think? One of the greatest challenges of exploring Earth is descending into the depths of the ocean. Even going just a few hundred meters below the surface was for centuries an unreachable endeavor. It was only in the last 70 years that humans built vehicles capable of exploring the ocean depths, and the first descent into the world's deepest point was made only in 1960. The oceans cover more than 70% of the planet's surface, and 90% of marine life is found between 0 and 50 meters below sea level, a depth that also represents the limit for recreational dives. As one descends, in addition to the normal atmospheric pressure present at the surface, the water exerts increasing hydrostatic pressure. Beyond 50 meters deep, the dangers increase, as does the skill and experience required of divers to tackle such environments. To withstand these extreme conditions and reach the deepest point on Earth requires a marvel of technology, specifically designed for research and exploration. Even conventional submarines are not able to descend beyond a few hundred meters below the surface. They require hulls capable of withstanding the water pressure, which, at great depths, is terrifyingly strong. In the 1930s, the first bathyspheres were experimented with. Steel spheres lowered by a steel cable from a ship to which they remained attached for the entire descent. And it was with one of these that in June 1930, engineer Otis Barton and naturalist William Beebe became the first men to exceed 600 feet, 180 meters in depth. To go deeper, however, a different type of vehicle was needed. And this is where the saga of Auguste Piccard and his son Jacques begins. In the 1940s, Swiss physicist Auguste Piccard was something of a celebrity. In 1931, he became the first man to visit the stratosphere, ascending to nearly 16,000 meters in altitude aboard his balloon equipped with a pressurized cabin. At that altitude, never before reached by anyone, he managed to make important measurements for the understanding of Earth's atmosphere, also becoming the first man to observe the curvature of the Earth. After his explorations upwards, he turned his attention to the depths of the sea and set out to develop an equivalent of his pioneering balloons that could withstand the immense pressure of the oceanic abysses. After interrupting the work due to World War II, with the help of his son Jacques, he managed to develop the FNRS-2, a bathyscape essentially consisting of a spherical cabin attached to a sort of submarine hull. After various experiments and refinements, in 1954, the FNRS-2 managed to reach a depth of 4,050 meters, or 13,290 feet, in the Atlantic, 160 miles off the coast of Dakar. But the two Piccards were already thinking even bigger, and thus came the project of the Trieste bathyscape, named after the Italian city where it was partly built. The main body of the new bathyscape, about 18 meters long and 3.5 meters wide, contained fuel tanks and ballast made up of 9 tons of iron pellets. Attached to the main body was a steel sphere that could be accessed through a hatch in a short corridor. 12.7 centimeters thick to withstand the water pressure at great depths, it had a diameter of 2.16 meters and could accommodate 2 people. A plexiglass window in the shape of a truncated cone allowed for viewing outside, and special bulbs capable of withstanding pressure greater than 1,000 atmospheres provided illumination of the surrounding environment. The crew could breathe thanks to the passage of air through a closed-loop system, which eliminated carbon dioxide by passing it through filters filled with soda lime. Like the FNRS-2, the Trieste was an autonomous marine vehicle, unlike the old diving spheres that depended on the ship from which they were lowered. The Trieste bathyscape entered service in 1953. The first dive took place on August 16th near Capri, and on the following September 30th, the vehicle managed to descend into the Tyrrhenian Trench off the coast of the island of Ponza to a depth about 3,150 meters. The Bathyscaphe operated in the Mediterranean for 4 years, making numerous descents beyond 3,700 meters or 12,139 feet. In 1958, the Trieste was purchased by the U.S. Navy, which replaced the steel sphere built in Ternau with another cabin produced by the German company Krupp. The U.S. Navy had a very specific purpose in doing this. They intended to use the Bathyscaphe for an endeavor never before attempted, and kept secret until the last moment. But what could it be? Was it perhaps a rescue mission, or the recovery of an atomic bomb as it had happened before? No, this time it was much riskier, almost as dangerous as going into space, because that's what it was, exploring something never before seen or touched by humans, the famous Mariana Trench. And here we come to the central point of the exposition. What exactly is the Mariana Trench from a geological perspective? Well, you probably already know the bottom of the ocean isn't all that different from the rest of the planet. If we could remove all the water covering the Earth, we'd uncover a familiar landscape of plains, mountains, and incredibly deep valleys. The result, much like their surface versions, of the constant movement of tectonic plates forming the Earth's crust. The tallest mountains of this largely unexplored new Earth are so tall that they emerge from the sea's surface as islands. Even more impressive, though, are the numbers of valleys, crevices, and abysses dotting the ocean floor. And the Mariana Trench is one of these, the deepest one. But there are others, like the Tonga Trench, which lies about 10,882 meters below sea level, or the Mindanao Trench, which plunges to 10,540 meters in the Philippine Sea. Geographically, the Mariana Trench is located in the western Pacific Ocean, about 200 kilometers or 124 miles east of the Mariana Islands, named in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria. It is, in essence, a gigantic fault formed by the collision of two tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the Philippine Plate, stretching over 2,500 kilometers in a crescent shape. In this system, the western edge of the Pacific Plate is pushed beneath the smaller Mariana Plate to the west. The Pacific Plate is one of the oldest oceanic crusts on Earth, up to 170 million years, and is therefore colder and denser, hence its significant height difference compared to that of the Mariana Plate, which is less dense, higher, and younger. The trench was discovered by the British ship Challenger in 1875 during a scientific expedition designed to revolutionize the foundations of modern oceanography. The Challenger measured, with the approximate means available at the time, a depth of 8,184 meters. And it wasn't until 1951 that another British expedition managed to establish that the immense cavity must reach at least 10,863 meters. The measurement has since been corrected by subsequent surveys. Today, we know that the abyss is divided into 3 basins: Western, Central, and Eastern, and that the maximum depth is 10,902 to 10,929 meters, recorded at the southern end of a narrow valley known as the Challenger Deep. At the bottom, the water column above exerts a pressure of 1,086 bars, more than 1,071 times the standard atmospheric pressure at sea level, and even more than 100 times the pressure on the surface of Venus. And the temperature ranges between 1 and 4 degrees Celsius, or 34 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Hang on a sec, guys, before we continue. Be sure to join the Insane Curiosity channel. Click on the bell, you'll help us to make products of even higher quality. Mariana Trench, a place more alien and dangerous than Venus. But now let's go back to following the events that led to its first exploration. On October 5, 1959, the Trieste set sail for the island of Guam aboard the cargo ship Santa Maria, officially launching Project Necton, under which a team of Navy officers, oceanographers, and engineers would attempt to achieve something unprecedented: to take humans to a depth of 11 kilometers for the first time. The crew, consisting of only 2 people, would be composed of Jacques Piccard, then 38 years old, and the young oceanographer and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh, 29 years old. Between November 1959 and January of 1960, Walsh and Piccard repeatedly broke depth records set in the Mediterranean during the Trieste's initial dives. To find the deepest point in the Mariana Trench, called Challenger Deep after the legendary 19th century oceanographic vessel, the Necton Project oceanographers couldn't rely on the imprecise maps available at the time. So they used explosives to measure the echo and pinpoint the exact spot to submerge the Trieste for its most important mission. January 23, 1960 was the chosen day. The sea was rough, teeming with sharks, and Piccard was reluctant to dive, worried that reaching the bathysphere's bridge to access the cabin through the hatch might be too dangerous. It was Walsh and the other expedition members who convinced him. Rather tense and apprehensive, the two reached the bathysphere and descended into the sphere, ready for immersion. Enclosed in a cabin as cold as a refrigerator and as large as a phone booth, Walsh and Piccard set aside their previous disagreements to focus on their mission, and then into the abyssopelagic zone beyond 4,000 meters. From the porthole of their cabin, Walsh and Piccard spotted a luminescent fish never seen before, and most notably began to hear the eerie metallic noises of the hull subjected to the enormous pressures of the ocean depths. Beyond 6,000 meters, entering the hadopelagic zone inside the cabin, the temperature dropped just above 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. In the absolute darkness, the descent must have seemed endless to Piccard and Walsh. They were about to touch the unexplored depths, sporadically illuminated by rapid and sudden flashes of plankton and in complete silence. At around 9,400 meters deep, when the pressure on the surface of the Trieste approached 1,000 kilograms per square centimeter, Walsh and Piccard heard a louder and more unsettling noise than the others. One of the external panes of the plexiglass window had cracked, making the entire ship tremble. A potential breach would have killed them instantly, but after a heated discussion, they decided to continue the descent. At 1:06 p.m., suddenly the spotlight illuminated the seabed, revealing a stretch of sand in the darkness. After 5.5 hours of immersion, the Trieste had reached the deepest point in the oceans. The onboard systems indicated a depth of 11,521 meters, or 37,799 feet. A measurement later revised to 10,916 meters, or 35,814 feet. As they observed the forms of life outside the porthole, the jubilant cries of the support ship, the USS Wandang, came through the intercom. A camera installed in the cabin by Time magazine captured Walsh and Piccard in a historic photograph, the deepest ever taken. The two men spent just 20 minutes on the ocean floor eating chocolate bars to keep their strength up. At that moment, the temperature inside the cabin was only 7 degrees Celsius. Before beginning their ascent, Walsh and Piccard saw a fish resemble a soul outside the window, confirming the presence of life even at the ocean's deepest point. However, the validity of their observation was later questioned, and it is now believed that they may have been fish-like invertebrates, which are thought unable to survive below 9,000 meters in depth. The ascent went smoothly, and after a little over 3 hours, Walsh and Piccard opened the Trieste's hatch on the surface of the Pacific Ocean. They were awarded by President Dwight Eisenhower at the White House a few days later, and in the following years they continued their oceanic explorations. Piccard passed away in 2008, while Walsh left us last October. The Trieste bathyscape was later moved to the Atlantic Ocean, where it was used by the U.S. Navy to search for the wreckage of the nuclear submarine USS Thresher, which sank in 1963. Since 1980, it has been on display at the Washington, D.C. Navy Museum. So this is the story of the Piccards, the Trieste bathyscape, and the first exploration of the Mariana Trench abyss. Just as with the post-Apollo era, when the moon was forgotten from 1972 until today, no other attempts followed Piccard and Walsh's endeavor for over half a century. To rekindle the exploration zeal of the ocean depths, the famous director James Cameron stepped in. Passionate about oceanography, he had a super technological bathyscape built, called the Deep Sea Challenger, a 7.3-meter tall torpedo-shaped submarine with an extremely pressure-resistant spherical metal cockpit. Inside this extremely cramped cockpit, only 109 centimeters in diameter, James Cameron remained in an almost fetal position for about 7 hours continuously. To cope with the extreme conditions present in ocean depths, the Deep-Sea Challenger benefited from the latest advances in underwater technology. Among these are ISO Float, the synthetic foam that forms the structure of the submarine, rows of pressure-resistant batteries, and a compact video system capable of capturing 3D images at great depths. The deep sea was rigorously tested on March 4, 2012, when the bathyscaphe reached a depth of 7,260 meters, or 23,820 feet, inside the Bougainville Trench. However, Cameron had to give up touching the bottom, about 1,000 meters lower, due to a propeller malfunction. A few days later, once the problem was resolved, the director managed to reach a depth of 8,221 meters, or 26,972 feet inside the same trench, where he observed various forms of life such as sea anemones and jellyfish on the sedimentary expanse and trench walls. After further trial dives, the decisive mission began on March 26, 2011 at 5:15 in the morning when the Deep-Sea Challenger launched from the support ship Mermaid Sapphire, began its descent to the Challenger Deep. After 2 hours and 37 minutes, half the time it took the Trieste half a century ago, at 7:52 a.m., Cameron radioed that he had touched the seabed at a depth of 10,908 meters, or 35,787 feet. After spending 3 hours on the ocean floor, also a record surpassing the Trieste's mere 20-minute stay, collecting soil samples, filming, and observing the surrounding environment, Cameron began the ascent. Thanks to releasing the ballasts, it ascended at a speed of 7 knots, taking only 70 minutes, practically one-third of the time it took the Trieste. The Trieste had only spent 20 minutes on the seabed and lacked both research equipment and a video device. In contrast, the Deep-Sea Challenger was designed as a true scientific platform. Once at the bottom, James Cameron was able to explore, collect samples, and film for the first time in history. This human achievement in high resolution, a real feat from which Cameron produced the film Deep-Sea Challenge 3D movie. Then, in 2019, much like what happened with the ascent of Everest, suddenly becoming the goal of hundreds of climbers, the Mariana Trench was stormed. Leading this new phase was Victor Vescovo, an American explorer specializing in oceanic depths, but also in space travel. A former naval officer, thanks to his personal wealth and the contribution of thrill-seeking billionaires, in 2018 he launched the ambitious 5 Deeps project with the goal of visiting 5 oceanic abysses by 2019. Mission accomplished thanks to the revolutionary limiting factor bathyscaphe, based on a titanium pressure sphere for 2 occupants, sitting side by side and equipped with 3 panoramic acrylic portholes for a magnificent view of the seabed. But Vescovo didn't stop there and immediately launched the new project, the exploration of the Challenger Deep. This he promptly achieved on April 28, 2019, when he piloted the limiting factor to a depth of 10,928 meters, or 35,853 feet, 16 meters, or 52 feet deeper than Cameron. He then repeated the feat on May 1st, becoming the first person to dive into the Challenger Deep twice, discovering at least 3 new species of marine animals and a certain amount of plastic waste. Among the underwater creatures encountered by Vescovo were a snailfish at 8,000 meters, 26,250 feet, and a spoonworm at almost 7,000 meters, or 23,000 feet, the deepest level at which the species had ever been encountered. From that date onwards, until July 2022, another 17 explorations of the Mariana Trench followed, always aboard the limiting factor and almost always piloted by Vescovo, who can now boast of having descended into the trench a staggering 15 times. The only interruption was the Chinese mission on November 10, 2020, which brought the Fendouzhi, a splendid bathyscaphe equipped with 2 mechanical arms, 7 cameras, 7 sonars, hydraulic drills, and other scientific devices. The only one capable of carrying 3 people down to a depth of 10,909 meters, or 35,791 feet. From July 2022 onward, no one has attempted to descend into the abyss. Could this be a sign of another long pause? Or is someone preparing for something even riskier and more exciting, like, for example, establishing a fixed station on the seabed? Only in this way, perhaps even with an automatic filming station, could we learn more about that environment so alien to us. Because every time we look up at the sky wondering, is there life up there? In the same way, it's inevitable to ask the same question when looking at these abysses so inhospitable to us. It's a tantalizing question, isn't it? The uncharted depths of the ocean hold mysteries as compelling as those of outer space. Who knows what secrets lie hidden in the dark, cold embrace of the Mariana Trench? Perhaps one day brave explorers will venture forth once more, armed with the latest technology and a thirst for discovery to unveil the secrets of the deep. Until then, we can only ponder and wonder, gazing into the abyss with a mix of trepidation and curiosity, eager to unlock its mysteries and reveal its hidden wonders.